you are free to drive your own power.
I'm part of the continuous improvement team in the Office of System and School Improvement at OSPI. And I'm also the OSPI grants manager. And so I've met or talked to several of you already, emailed many of you already. So it's good to be here and on Zoom with you today. We have received a lot of questions and requests from districts and schools for information about how they can best use the variety of funding sources that are available to them. And I'm going to be staying after outreach today to address any questions you may have about the OSPI grants. But at this time, I'd like to welcome two of my colleagues from OSPI to provide some information and some resources about managing your funding streams and the ESSER2 CARES Act money, which was just newly released, and also some need-to-knows for those of you with federally funded grants, including a lot of you with a lot of the OSPI grant packages. We ask that you reserve maybe any questions you have until the question and answer time after the presentation, and then we'll get to as many of those as we can. And this session is going to be recorded. Bill, if you could set that up for us. And a full slide deck with even more information will be available to you after the presentation. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jason Miller, who is the Assistant Director of Title I, Part A and LAP at OSPI, and Amy Harris, who is the Director of Federal Fiscal Policy at OSPI. So Jason and Amy, thanks for making the time to be here with us today. And I will let you decide with Bill who's going to run the PowerPoint.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. It's good to be here. Amy, if you're good, I'll just start with my slides, and whoever is running the slides, I'll just tell you when to move to the next one, if that works out. So on the next slide, I'm just going to go over the braiding, and I forgot there was actions on this. You can open up, I think there's one more. There we go, that should be it. So I'm going to go over these a little bit, how we consider them, different ways to think about these two terms, blending and braiding, and then some resources. I'll try to go through this real quickly so Amy has a lot of time and we can answer questions afterwards. So when we're talking about braiding, we're really just talking about coordinating, using the funds together in a coordinated way to support the programs and initiatives that you have in your district or school. And blending is more of the combining. This provides more flexibility, but there's limited ways that funds can be blended. So in the blended example, the funds lose their character. They lose some of their, most of their restrictions around them and become more flexible. With each of these, consolidating in a school-wide or transferring or reaping, there's still some restrictions around them, but we can go through those real quickly. And I think on the next slide, I have a little more details. So again, braiding, there's no difference between braiding funds and not braiding funds other than you're coordinating the use of the funds. And blending, one thing to keep in mind for blending is in Washington State, we still need to claim the funds under the original funding source. There, in the new system that we're working into developing EGMS to replace iGrants, there may be a little more flexibility on that claiming side, but we're still working on that to provide some flexibility there. More information on that coming in a future meeting. So next slide. So when we talk about blending, the first way and the most flexible way to use funds in a blended way is in a Title I school-wide program. In a Title I school-wide program, in the plan, within a building, a Title I school-wide plan, you can combine most federal programs and some state programs into this pot of school-wide funds. Those funds lose their character, but they keep their intent and purpose. So you could mix Title II into the school-wide funds, and then you could use those Title II funds to support, help pay for a teacher that's providing intervention services that are outlined in your plan, or buying supplies, whatever is part of the school-wide plan, which is using these funds to support any of those activities that are described in the plan that support the needs that are expressed in the plan. In a school-wide plan, we recommend that you use a subcode for all of the funds, so you can easily provide a report on which funds are included and which expenses are included in that school-wide funding. Transferring funds, what you're doing here is Title I fund, Title II or Title IV funds become Title I funds, for example, or some of the other title program funds. And in that case, they're blended in the sense that they become the other funds. They are no longer Title II funds or Title IV funds if you're transferring them. And then they would again go to support the rules and requirements around the funds they were transferred into. On the next slide, we have reaping. So reaping is just for those rural school districts that are eligible for this flexible use authority. And this allows you don't move the funds at all. You just are allowed to use the allowable uses for other funding, other programs, like Title II funds can be expended as if they were Title I funds if you have the REAP authority here. So on the next slide, this link here is to our Unlocking Federal and State Funds document. This will give, it's about 200 pages of examples and ideas to help you better coordinate your funds or blend your funds. On the next slide, it's broken up into actually 3 parts, but the 2 main parts here, the first part is the largest, and this just gives a whole bunch of examples and ideas and allowable uses for several, most of the federal programs and several state programs. So that could be beneficial. Will be beneficial in braiding your funds, coordinating with other programs, and then blending. There's part 2 has information about the blending. On the next slide, the part 1 is set up around these specific topic areas, and we have allowable uses of most of all those funding sources within each of these topic areas. So I encourage you to go and look through there. Instead of downloading it, you can just look at the PDF and do Control F and find what specifically an activity you're thinking about, and see which programs or which funding sources allow that. On the next slide, one more slide has some tips. These are related to a previous workshop that we did last year or the year before in Spokane School District. This is a flow chart that they use, and gives you an idea of how they coordinate, how they work together to coordinate their funds, how to braid their funds, and possibly blend funds. And this is the process where they make the decisions along the way. The next slide. This is kind of in the back at the early stages, trying to doing a needs assessment, figuring out what you need. Here are some steps that Moses Lake used to come to make decisions here on how to blend or braid funds. And then the last one is from Rochester School District. This form actually helps them think about the actual activity. What's their activity they want to do? What are the rules around it? What are possible ways to fund it? And then other things to consider about, like reporting, for example. So those are a couple tools that could help you in this process. And I think that's the last of my slides.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate you being here this morning.
Sure. And I'll stick around for any other questions after Amy's done.
Hello, everyone. Looks like it's my turn. So today I'll be talking about some federal grant requirements, including, along with the ESSER2 grant. And I think someone posted the slide deck in the chat. Thank you. There's a lot of slides that I have in here that are hidden that you're not going to be able to see today, but they should be included in the slide deck. So there's going to be a lot more information in there related to some of the topics that I'm going to be talking about. So the first slide here talks about federal grant requirements relating to salaries and purchasing. So I just wanted to give you a really high level overview of time and effort and federal procurement. And again, the slides that are hidden have more information on these two topics. So time and effort. Employees that have salaries that are charged all or in part to federal funds are required to keep time and effort. So the type of time and effort required depends on the number of cost objectives or programs that they are charged to. So for example, if salaries are charged to part Title I and part Basic Ed, time and effort is required. If salaries are charged just to Basic Ed, time and effort is not required. So again, if you're charging any salaries all or in part to federal funds, then time and effort is required. Some examples of the types of time and effort. If there's only one program charged, let's say the employee is only being charged to Title I, then they would be required to do a semi-annual certification. If they are charged to multiple programs, for example, Title I, Basic Ed, Title II, they would need to do a monthly time and effort. And there's also some other exceptions as well in there that I have on my other slides. For federal procurement, I wanted to point out some of the most important topics to consider when using federal funds to make purchases of goods or services. You must follow the more restrictive bid thresholds of state or federal law or your own district policy. So it's really important to make sure, as in bullet 4 says, you have written procedures for procurement that includes the purchases of goods and services with federal funds to make sure that you're using the right thresholds when purchasing those goods or services. The next bullet talks about checking for vendors to make sure they have not been suspended or debarred. So when you make purchases of goods or services with federal funds, $25,000 or more, you must check that the vendor has not been suspended or debarred. And there's really 3 ways of doing this. You can check on sam.gov and enter the vendor name and print out the results. You can include the language in the contract that the vendor signs, or you can have a separate attestation that the vendor signs that they're not suspended or debarred. But it's really important, again, to do this prior to any services being rendered, prior to the contract being signed. The next bullet talks about when purchasing goods or services with federal funds over $250,000, you must perform a cost price analysis and keep this on file in case you do get audited or reviewed. And then the last bullet again talks about having those written procedures for purchasing goods or services with federal funds. And the written procedures also need to include standards of conduct covering conflict of interest, and a reminder to update these policies annually to make sure they're up to date with all of the current bid thresholds and any other changes that often occur every year, it seems like. Auditors and reviewers look at those procedures, and that's what they use to audit to. On the next slide, okay, so now we're going to get into the SR2 grant. And I'm going to talk to you about some information for the grant and then go into some allowable activities. So the authorized legislation is there. It was authorized under the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act in December. The period of availability, it's the same as ESSER1, so it may be used for pre-award costs dating back to March 13th, 2020, and that's when the president declared COVID a national emergency. They are available for obligation through September 30th, 2023. However, because ESSER1 funds expire first on September 30th, 2022, districts are strongly encouraged to spend their ESSER1 funds first. Next slide. So the use of funds for ESSER2 is the same as ESSER1. However, they did add 3 additional uses of funds, specifically including addressing learning loss, preparing schools for reopening, testing, repairing, and upgrading projects to improve air quality in school buildings. I will note those differences in some of my next slides. The prohibited use of funds for ESSER2 is really the same as ESSER1. No bonuses or merit pay, no subsidizing or offsetting executive salaries, and no expenditures related to unions. Next slide. Okay, so the next 3 slides go into the allowable activities under ESSER1 and ESSER2. And I won't go through all of these, but you can see there's a lot of them. And I want to point out that ESSER1 and ESSER2 is really very flexible with its uses. So I'll just highlight a few here. Activities authorized under programs under ESSA and IDEA, Carl Perkins and the McKinney-Vento Act. Also related to the coordination and preparation of response efforts with other agencies and addressing the needs of low-income students or students with disabilities. Next slide, please. So again, these are more allowable activities that were available under ESSER1 and ESSER2. Again, there's a lot of them. I'll just highlight a few. There's training and professional development on sanitation and minimizing the spread of COVID, purchasing supplies to sanitize and clean the facilities, purchasing educational technology, providing mental health and supports. Next slide, please. And so this slide here talks about the allowable uses for ESSER2. So these are the 3 that were added in ESSER2. So again, they include addressing learning loss, school facility repairs and improvements, and inspection, testing, maintenance, repairs, etc. Next slide, please. And I want to say that all of those allowable uses on the preceding slides are included on page 2 of the ESSER grant application. So again, the purpose of ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 is to prevent, prepare, and respond to the coronavirus. And as I mentioned, ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 funds are very flexible and may be used for salaries and benefits, paid leave, furloughs, and unemployment due to COVID, PPE, cleaning supplies, hand washing stations, etc., to prevent the spread of COVID, instructional technology to assist with distance learning, professional development related to distance learning or preventing the spread of COVID. Next slide. So I just wanted to give you a heads up as well that with ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, supplement, not supplant, and maintenance of effort are not subject to these ESSER 2 and ESSER 1 funds. So supplement, not supplant basically means that federal funds should be used to enhance and not replace local and state dollars, but that does not apply to ESSER 2. And since there's no supplement, not supplant provision, that's why we're able to provide the federal unrestricted indirect cost rate for this grant, which is typically a lot higher than the restricted federal indirect rate. Also, maintenance of effort does not apply to local educational agencies, including school districts for ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. So in other words, you're not required to maintain effort. Basically, maintenance of effort is you have to have a certain level of expenditures from year to year, at least 90% from year to year, and that's in total or per pupil. So that requirement, that federal requirement, is not applicable for ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. Next slide. So this slide talks about the grant application. It is Form Package 120 in iGrants, and it's now available. At this time, only Title I recipients in 2021 are able to apply for the grant. And you must have a school reopening plan prior to receiving proceeds for this grant. However, the submission of the reopening plan is not a condition of grant application approval. So we can still approve your grant application. You just can't get proceeds or claim from the grant until you submit the school reopening plan. Next slide. This slide has a lot of resources on there, our bulletin, and then some other resources from our website, Department of Education's website, and the Coronavirus and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act link is there as well. The program contacts for this grant application is myself and Larry Fazzari. So we have our contact information there if you want to reach out with further questions for ESSER. Next slide. So yeah, this is my last slide here. If you have any questions related to time and effort, federal procurement, or ESSER 2, feel free to reach out to me. And it sounds like we can take some questions now, and I see some in the chat. So Mary, are you able to perhaps read the questions in the chat for us?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing questions. I'm seeing requests for the links which we found.
Okay, maybe there's
So
just direct
open
messages
it
to
up.
me.
Maybe it was. Or we can open it up if people want to unmute or put their question in the chat. Either way, feel free. This is a chance where you've got people's attention who know the answers.
And we're good with time, right? We're doing okay?
Yeah, I believe so. In 7 minutes or so.
Amy, I had a question.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about, like, what is the difference between the school improvement plan and a school reopening plan?
Jason, do you want to maybe handle that one? School reopening plan. Okay. I could maybe answer the school reopening plan. Even though I'm not directly a part of that requirement on our website, I know that schools were required to fill out a template to us with their school reopening plan. But again, I don't have a lot of information on what's required in that plan, but I know the information's on our website.
And unfortunately, I don't have any additional information on that either.
But one thing that I could do is I could get information on the school reopening plan and send that to Mary, and she can send that to everyone.
Yeah, that
That'd
would be
be great.
terrific.
Okay,
It is on
yeah,
the OSPI website, and it was something that was sent out in February to all districts that needed to be submitted by March 1st.
right. That is
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, I can send you the link for that.
Now, the school
Okay.
improvement plan is what happens at the building level to advance continuous improvement and reduce opportunity and performance gaps, or further support those students for which schools were identified for improvement in the ESSER identification cycle 3 years ago. So the school improvement plan's a little more specific. It's that fluid continuous improvement process. It's a living, breathing document that identifies what your priority goals are for those students and for your school communities, and developing cultures of learning and experimentation and data collection and people, processes, systems, everything we talked about earlier today.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I did get a direct question from Jill, and this might be helpful for everyone else, so I'll go ahead and read it. It says, our business manager was told that we had to have ESSER2 grant done by March 31st. I see on the iGrant itself, it says the due date is August 31st. Do you know which is correct? That is not correct, that it has to be done by March 31st. The only requirement was if you wanted to get paid for March claims, you had to have the grant approved by March 15th. So that might be what that person is talking about. But otherwise, yeah, you have the rest of the school year to get that grant application in.
Thanks, Amy. I thought that was correct as far as claims. Obviously, you can't claim it until you have it approved, but
Right.
I just wanted to make sure because we really don't have a handle on what category we're going to put everything in for ESSER2. And I think we could kind of fake it, but then we just have to revise it quite a bit. So I don't want to do that if I don't have to.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You could definitely do that and just update it with a budget revision later. I have heard that some districts are doing that. So that's an option, but it's, like I said, it's up to you. And then Jill, you had also asked a question later. It says, is it better to get it turned in and revised, or do we only have to get it in until we want to start claiming the dollars in April? So are you talking about the reopening plan, or are you talking about the budget?
No, you answered my
Okay.
question. I was talking about the iGrant itself. Because
Gotcha.
it just came out last week. So I mean, it's pretty easy. It's not tough to do, but
Right.
we want to have it pretty accurate before we click submit.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's hard to get a lot of budget revisions down the road too, so.
And I don't know if it has a budget sheet to it that I've seen. I think it's that smart sheet.
Oh, okay, yeah, and that's something separate. Thank you for pointing that out. That is on another slide that's hidden. So that's part of the claims process. So at the time that you do your monthly claim, you also want to submit and update the smart sheet information. And that's the same thing that was required for ESSER 1. For ESSER 2, the information in the smart sheet does look a little different, but it's the same kind of process. You know, when you claim, you want to update the smart sheet as well. Any other questions, Mary? Anything? I don't see anything in the chat.
See anything there? Anybody else have a question?